Hey, what is going on, guys? As you may or may not know, Project Beyond recently decided to switch over to working on getting Season 6 running, and they're planning to go to version 6.31. So, in today's video, we're going to talk about what you should expect when Project Beyond Season 6 comes out. We'll talk about the state of the game in terms of the average skill level you might expect relative to other projects, other seasons. We'll talk about the shotgun meta, the state of mobility, the general meta in terms of the other classes besides shotguns, and then finally, how strong I think controller will overall be. I'll play some era gameplay in the background from Season 6. That's probably the most similar to how Beyond will play. But I don't think it's going to be super similar to Era Season 6 either. It's going to be more of a mix of Era Season 6, Season 7, and Easy FN Season 7. And you'll kind of see that as we go through this video, as there are a number of differences against Era Season 6. Let's start out with the state of the game in terms of the average skill that you can expect. You know, Project Beyond in Chapter 2, Season 2, I think was an incredibly difficult project to perform in. As seasons go on, more and more modern features come into the game, like Turbo Build. Turbo Build gets faster, edit on release, sprint by default. You know, all these things will just naturally make the game more difficult as people will, on average, be better from these features. Jumping back to Season 6, I think that's going to significantly cut down on how good people can simply be because of these limitations that are imposed by being on an older season. However, I still think it's going to be more difficult than Era Season 6, though, because we're going to have things like the purple and gold pump, double pump. These are kinds of things that are just going to make the game more difficult. Overall, I'd say expect it probably to be not like Era Season 6 level, probably more like Era Season 7 or maybe even slightly harder. It's going to be that kind of situation where classical tactics like base building, tower camping, those really aren't going to work, I don't think. And I think the meta will probably be more towards box fights and build fighting. It's definitely going to be probably a step easier than Chapter 2, Season 2 Beyond, but just something to keep in mind. Also, something to keep in mind is I think if you're playing late game, which they probably will have late game, that's just naturally going to be more difficult. As everyone's forced into close range, mechanics become more important. Generally, better players seem to play late game, so just keep that in mind. If you're playing normal games, it might be like Era Season 7, but late games, good luck. It's still going to be quite difficult, I expect. Okay, let's move on to the shotgun meta. Unfortunately, I think the shotgun meta is going to be overall not too interesting. Well, yes, there are 4 shotguns that exist. The pump, tac, heavy, and double barrel. Honestly, you're realistically going to have to run the pump because the purple and gold pump will exist, which are going to be absolutely dominant. And on top of that, double shotgun, with the removal of shotgun delay, it's just going to mean double spaz is going to be insanely busted. There are some interesting aspects to this, though. Like, we've never really had the double barrel without the shotgun delay, which could actually be somewhat interesting if you can't find a spaz. Because the double barrel draws very quickly, doing a pump to double barrel actually could be really good. But realistically, as soon as you find spazes, you're just going to run double spaz. There's not really a reason to run pump heavy when double pump exists because, you know, the pump draws faster. I just don't think it's going to be all that interesting of a meta in terms of the shotguns. What would make it interesting is if they nerfed the pump shotgun back to Season 4 levels. You know, I've said this in Easy FN Season 7 videos. I'm going to keep saying this. If we push the pump back to Season 4 draw speed, where it's the slowest, it will at least make the meta more interesting. So honestly, it's just going to be a pump-dominated meta. But there could be some interesting aspects with the double barrel in that, you know, the draw speed is very quick. It could be an interesting secondary shotgun. So, there's that. In terms of the state of mobility, Glider Redeploy is vaulted in 6.31, which means that the mobility is overall going to be significantly less than Era Season 6. I think that's good. I think Era Season 6, I didn't mind Glider Redeploy necessarily. What I did mind, though, is I think there was just too much mobility. You know, when there's too much mobility, you get third party constantly, and people in the mid game are just dying out too fast, and there's not enough people in the end game. So I think that's probably good for the overall state of the game. It's going to be a much more vehicle-based mobility, as quadcopter flying most likely will still be a thing, so that's going to be the fastest way to get around. You're not going to see giant ramps in the sky, as there will be no gliders items, so there's no way to get glider redeploy without like finding an exploit or something like that. Okay, moving on to the overall meta, the heavy AR will be in Beyond Season 6. It was not in Era Season 6. Heavy AR will be very competitive. You know, it's going to synergize very well with controller L2. It's going to be a really solid option against the Scar. That's like a 50-50 choice there. The hand cannon will also be there with the full structure damage. That will also be a very powerful weapon. Being able to one-shot walls, of course, is very useful. I think double pump will make it slightly harder to justify the hand cannon because you're going to want to run double pumps so you You could maybe replace your AR. That would be a reasonable thing to do. But of course, the heavy AR and Scar are also very good. So I think that'll be a slight indirect nerf to the hand cannon, as it'll be a little harder to justify using it, but I still think it's going to be a very strong weapon in that meta as well. And you're realistically probably going to want to take it. And with double pumps, you can probably just run double pump hand cannon and probably be fine. The drum gun is also supposed to get unvaulted, which is going to be ridiculously busted as well. It's not going to be as busted as the double pumps will, especially with the spaz, but the drum gun is still going to be devastating. It's going to be realistically not a shotgun replacement because double pump is so good. It's going to be a crazy good SMG. You can use it as an AR too, in a sense. I think double pump, though, is going to kind of keep the drum gun in check, where the drum gun really is going to be harder to justify because double pumps is so busted that you're probably better off just going for two shot clip out with the pumps instead of running the drum gun. It's honestly going to keep the drum gun in check. So I don't think it'll be too big of an issue, but it's going to be a very strong gun. If you're on high ping, you're new to the game, drum gun is going to be a very good gun to run because it's still going to be really strong and busted. Finally, moving to the static controller, I think controller is going to be very good in some ways because the weapons in the meta are going to synergize nicely, but there's also some serious limitations, right? So the heavy AR is very good with controller. That gun is designed to work with L2 very nicely. Hand cannon, also a very good gun to run with L2. Drum gun is decent with L2, not spectacular, but pretty good. The double pumps, though, really does not work well with L2. Fact of the matter is, I think the long-range aim controller is going to be very scary to run against. With the heavy AR and hand cannon, you're going to be taking crazy amounts of damage against anyone who knows how to use L2 correctly at long range. Will be able to do, consistently hit at least 50 damage with the hand cannon every shot. Heavy AR, you're doing 36 damage at long range over and over again. Very dangerous. But you have to remember that with controller, your edit sensitivity is not tied to your build sensitivity or even having its own sense. It's going to be tied to your base sensitivity, which means you're going to be put in an awkward situation of, do you increase your sensitivity to make editing better, or do you decrease it to make L2 better? So controller, I think, will be decent and viable. It'll be overall not insanely strong, but it'll be very strong in the right position. So if you're in a squad, you have some keyboard players, some controller players, that could be interesting because you have a controller player just L2 at range, and then you have your keyboard players for, most of your other engagements. Could be an interesting meta. So overall, I think Beyond Season 6 is going to be interesting. I don't think it's going to be my favorite meta per se. I think there's a little bit too many busted weapons. The hand cannon is going to be really strong. Drum gun's going to be really strong. And purple gold pump is going to be crazy busted. And even the green and blue is honestly going to be crazy busted with double pump with the draw speed. I think it could be interesting, but I think some fixes need to be made to the meta. What I would do is nerf the pump draw speed back to Season 4 levels, as I will continue to argue for. Nerf the drum gun down to, say, 22, 23 damage, so it's still good, but not completely busted. I mean, we drop the hand cannon structure damage to 140, right? And then, you'd balance out the meta a bit. I think it could be good. But still, I'm curious to see how Beyond Season 6 goes. Could be interesting. And with that, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you in the next one.